Welcome to the video for C2.2.3 where we're going to look at forming ions. So in the previous video we drew dot and cross diagrams for the electron configuration or the electron structure of atoms. So today we're going to look at forming ions. So first of all, some key points that you should copy down. So last lesson we looked at atoms and our electron configuration. When atoms react, they either gain or lose electrons depending on where they are in the periodic table. And by doing this, they get a full outer shell of electrons. So if they're metals, then they'll lose electrons, and they'll lose the same number as the group. So if they're in group 1, they'll lose 1 electron. If they're in group 2, they'll lose 2 electrons. So non-metals conversely gain electrons, and they'll gain, so this is a bit slightly more complicated, they'll gain the same number as 8 minus the group number. So if they were in group 7, like fluorine or chlorine, they would gain 8 minus 7, they would gain 1 electron. And by gaining or losing electrons, they become ions. So an ion is just an atom that's either gained or lost electrons and therefore has a charge. So atoms normally are neutral. So when they've lost or gained electrons, they're now charged and called ions. So electrons are negative. So if you lose an electron or electrons, that makes it a positive ion because you've got more protons than electrons, so you've got a positive charge overall. If an atom is gaining electrons, then it's got more electrons than protons, so it's going to make a negative ion. So the most important thing we need to be able to do from this lesson is to draw dot and cross diagrams for ions. So when we do this, it's very similar to what we did last lesson for the electron configuration diagrams for atoms, but we just need to remember to gain or lose electrons to make the charged particle the ion. Now, when we do this, the charge belongs to the whole ion. It's not localized in one specific place. So quite often people draw the positive or negative charge in the center where the nucleus would be, and that's wrong. What we need to do instead is draw a square bracket around our electron diagram and then put the charge outside the bracket, and we put it in the top right hand corner of the bracket. So for example, there's lithium plus ion would have 2 electrons, and I'll talk you through actually drawing this in a minute. Because it's lost 1 electron because it's in group 1, it's going to have a +1 charge, so you'd have a square bracket around the electron configuration and then a plus in the corner. So let's do some examples of these. So if I do that lithium one from scratch, so the easiest thing to do whilst you're unsure and you're not practiced in these is to draw the atom out first. So if I look in the periodic table, for my lithium atom, it's got 2 numbers, it's got 7 and 3. And remember, for the electrons, we're looking at the smallest number of electrons. Sorry, the smallest number in the chemical symbol, and that's 3. So that means lithium's got 3 electrons. And if we think back to our rules from the last lesson, we have the first shell can hold 2 electrons, and then the others can hold 8. So if we've got my lithium here, it's got 2 electrons in the first shell, and then the third electron has to go in the second shell. So if I'm forming an ion from this, so when they're forming ions, they're trying to get a full outer shell. So this first shell has 2 electrons. So that's full. So my lithium atom can either lose 1 electron to have a full inner shell, or it could gain 7, and it always does what involves the minimum amount of electrons. So it's easier to lose 1 electron than it is to gain 7. So all I do is draw my lithium out again with my full inner shell, and then I don't need to draw the second shell because it's not got an electron in anymore. And I draw this square bracket around it to show that it's now a charged particle, and because it's lost 1 electron and an electron is negatively charged, it becomes +1. But I don't need, when I've got a +1 or -1 charge, I don't write the 1. So it just becomes that. So if I was to do, if we take a different example, if I was to take fluorine, so if we look in the periodic table, fluorine has 9 electrons. Remember, I'm looking for the smallest number. It has 9 electrons. So if I was to do what we did in the last lesson, I would have 2 electrons there. That leaves 9 minus 2 is 7. So I would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 electrons in the outer shell. Now, if I look at this, it's got 7 electrons in the outer shell, so it can either gain 1 to get 8 and have a full shell, or it can lose 7. So it's going to gain 1. So it's going to gain 1, and so I need to draw this out again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And the one that's gaining I'm going to draw as a dot, just to show that it's come from somewhere else. And now I need to have a square bracket around that, and because it's gained 1 electron, so it's got 1 extra electron compared to what it should have when it's a neutral atom, it's going to have a charge of -1. And again, I don't need to put the one on, I can just put minus.